The complainant in this matter, Robert Davis, sent an email to Mr. Longstreet. And in that email indicated that he's going to assume that we're not going to follow the ethics ordinance concerning his complaint. He doesn't really state why he's assuming that or what our motive for that would be. But he indicated that he was going to assume that we were not going to follow the ethics ordinance. So he asked Mr. Longstreet if Mr. Longstreet would accept service of process regarding a lawsuit that he intended to file. I was a little taken aback by that. The few years that I've been on the commission, I've never seen that level of distrust or that hyperbole directed at the group. And I wanted Ms. Johnson here today before we even discuss the complaints. I have a concern regarding the question of whether the ethics board was sued or somebody asked us to accept service of a civil complaint that would sue the board. What would we tell them? Who would accept service? Who is responsible for accepting service of process in the event that this board was sued?
Good morning, everyone. Felicia Johnson, counsel to the Wayne County Commission. With regards to any request to accept service or any notice of a lawsuit, I would say that the first step should be before you respond to any such request is to contact the Office of Corporation Counsel. Corporation Counsel represents all departments except for the commission, even though they do in certain matters. With regards to suits that would be filed against Wayne County, this board is a part of Wayne County. So the first step will be to contact Corporation Counsel. From there, depending on the circumstances, they will advise you. I don't know if Corp Counsel is on the line and would like to weigh in on the matter, but I would recommend you. Oh, there you go. So Sue's here.
Good morning, everyone. This is Sue Hamoud, Deputy Corporation Counsel. As Ms. Johnson pointed out, the Wayne County Ethics Board is a subdivision of Wayne County. So Wayne County would be the proper party, and the court rules set forth who service is supposed to be effectuated upon.
All right, so that answers my question. So if we receive further inquiries from anybody, not just Mr. Reed, but anybody in the world that said, look, we're contemplating litigation against the ethics board, will you accept service? We direct them to Corporation Counsel. We tell them that we're not able to accept service, direct them there, and Ms. Hamoud's office will handle the inquiry. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, yes, that's fine.
Okay, very good. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Johnson? We want to thank Ms. Johnson for being here this morning, and we want to thank Ms. Hamoud for being on Zoom. Does anybody have any questions for anyone? If you do, now is the time to ask them. And if not, we'll get into the complaints themselves. Mr. Woods, Dr. Ford, Ms. Lewis, Mr. Schaefer, any questions regarding that subject? Just that limited subject of somebody wanting to file litigation. Mr. Longstreet, for that matter, I shouldn't have skipped over you. You're our counsel. Do you have any questions regarding what Ms. Hamoud and Ms. Johnson told us?
No, I spoke with Corporation Counsel James Heath in regards to this matter. So I kind of knew who to go to.
Okay, very good. Well, with that said, with that clarified, let's address item number one, the communication dated May 16, 2023 from Robert Davis regarding Richard Lynch, and item number two, similar communication, but concerning Julia Dale. Now, we have received answers from both of those complainants. They are in the package that you've received today. What I would like to know, Mr. Longstreet, from you, you were kind enough to include the both of the respondents' answers and the case law that was cited by their counsel. Can you give us a brief update in as much detail as you'd like, I guess, of where we stand today with the complaint and what your recommendation is as to both of those complaints?
I will start with the recommendation. My recommendation to this board is that the complaint filed by Mr. Robert Davis be dismissed for lack of subject matter jurisdiction. as to both parties. And in support of my opinion and recommendation, I state the following. Mr. Davis filed a complaint against both Mr. Richard Lynch and Julie Dale, both employees of the Third Circuit Court. He alleges a violation of the Wayne County Ethics Code, alleging a violation of section 40.4G, 1, 2, and 3. Without going into the great details of the allegations in the complaint, because I do believe they were spelled out. The board has a copy and the board has read them. We don't need to go into the details of the complaint. But the bottom line is the quintessential issue in this case is whether this board has subject matter jurisdiction over the parties. First, speaking is to Mr. Richard Lynch. Mr. Richard Lynch no longer works for Wayne County. His service to Wayne County, I do believe, ended in January of 2023. Thus, he would not be subject to the jurisdiction of the Wayne County Ethics Board because he is not a Wayne County employee. Further, because he's no longer employed by the Wayne County, by the Third Circuit Court. Furthermore, I contacted Ms. LeMaster. Ms. Julie LeMaster is the Director of Human Resources for Wayne County. As a part of my investigation into this complaint, I contacted her and requested two things. One, to verify whether they were on the county payroll. They are. Both Ms. Dale and Mr. Lynch at one time were both on the county payroll. The second question is whether they signed the ethics statement that is required to be signed by every county employee, and whether they also entered into the ethics disclosure that is required by any lawyer who works for the county. Because they are not county employees, neither one signed the ethics statement that's required by the ethics ordinance, and they do not issue the ethics disclosure required by the ethics ordinance. Secondly, I do believe the law firm of, I don't want to pronounce the name, but the answer filed by the respondents spelled out.
Collins Einhorn, I think is.
Collins Einhorn, okay. They provided an answer to the complaint by Mr. Davis. They provided case law. That case law, and the one case that is on point is Judicial Attorneys Association versus State. And this case involved the transfer from the old Recorder's Court to now what is now known as the Third Circuit Court. And the controversy in that particular case was whether the county assumed the responsibility of employing for court employees once it became a Third Circuit Court. And the long and short of it is that the court ruled that it was unconstitutional, that it was a separation of powers violation for the county to employ court employees, and that the judiciary had exclusive control over the court and its staffing. My staff and I did what they call shepherdizing these cases. This is still good case law. Therefore, us having any jurisdiction over the Third Circuit Court employees would be a separation of powers violation. Thus, we do not have subject matter jurisdiction over Ms. Dale or Mr. Lynch. And again, my recommendation is this matter be dismissed for lack of subject matter jurisdiction.
I'd like to raise a couple points for discussion. I don't know if the other board members have focused on a letter dated April 7, 2023, but the Department of State, through Joycelyn Benson's office, the Secretary of State that oversees elections and elections issued, did an investigation on this. And actually, my reading of that is that that letter states very clearly that the monies that were utilized to defend these judges that were running for re-election should not have been expended. Perhaps the judges should have been responsible for those expenses on their own. I bring that up not to point out that I agree or disagree with what the State Department found, but to say that their correspondence that they issued to these two individuals essentially found that this should not happen again, what occurred. But despite all that, the chief judge rule vests all this authority to conduct investigations and to take action against these people in the chief judge of the circuit court. So what I would say is this: We'll open the floor for discussion of Mr. Longstreet's recommendation, but I want you to know that I was impressed that there was an independent investigation done and independent findings that we have to look at here. So open for discussion. Anybody want to talk about the matter? Mr. Woods, Dr. Ford, Ms. Lewis, Mr. Schaefer?
You said that they weren't Wayne County employees?
They are, and let me make a clarification, they are funded by Wayne County, but they are not county employees. They are under the exclusive control of the chief judge of the Third Circuit Court, who has exclusive control over the staffing of the Third Circuit Court.
Out of our jurisdiction, there's some sensitivity that Mr. Davis is raising with the ethics board. How will we respond? And then, you know, if he's got further concern.
Can you repeat that?
Corporate counsel to respond to Mr. Davis' accusations of, you know, ethics board.
What?
How should we handle that?
Well, I spoke to Mr. James Heath, who is Corporation Counsel for Wayne County, in reference to Mr. Davis's threat of a lawsuit. It is his position that, or from when I talked to him, his position that we should refer everything to Corporation Counsel if we are sued. I don't think he needs to participate, or Corporation Counsel needs to participate in the answer to Mr. Davis. I think we should wait and see what happens. Once we responded to him that there is no violation of Wayne County Ethics Code because we do not have subject matter jurisdiction, there's really nothing to talk about. And if he files a lawsuit against the Wayne County Ethics Board, it would be a moot and feckless lawsuit because we don't have jurisdiction. There's nothing we can do about it. So to me, any threat would be feckless of a lawsuit. So I don't think that we need to have Corporation Counsel involved in that at all, because to me, at this point, it's a moot issue.
You know, another point, Ms. Lewis, that it kind of impressed me, because these individuals did not sign these Wayne County Ethics Board disclosures, they weren't required to sign a receipt stating that they got a copy of the ethics ordinance. That all county employees have to do that. That's how they're put on notice of it. So it would seem to me that long before we became involved as individual members of this board, a decision was made that those people that work within the court system under the jurisdiction of the chief judge do not fall within our jurisdiction to look at for ethics violations. So that was impressive to me as well. Any more comments, discussion that any board member wants to address? We have a motion? Do we have a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Ayes have it. The files will be dismissed. And Mr. Longstreet, what I would urge, I don't think we need a motion on this. Since there has been some discussion of potential litigation, I believe that if anything comes to your attention regarding a potential lawsuit or filing or who has to be served, I really believe that should be addressed to Ms. Hammoud's office, as opposed to having you as our counsel write a response. So you'll do that, okay. Yes. Leave it to Mr. Longstreet, perhaps.
That's procedure, yes.
Yeah. Any other inquiries, Mr. Schaefer? All right. We're moving on from item D2 to E. And under E, such other matters as may be properly submitted by the board. I've been informed that the commission staff member, Mr. Slezak, wants to address something regarding parking, or is somebody else going to address that?
Joe Slezak, policy analyst for the commission. I've been asked by Tim Johnson, who's the director of administration for the commission, to inform the board that parking for the board will continue at the First Street parking deck on, your passes will work on meeting days at First Street.
Okay, so there's no change.
There's no change. There was a change in the system, in the parking system at the Buell garage, and apparently that caused some issues.
All right. Anybody have any questions? Has anybody ever parked at First Street Garage? I know Miss Lewis one time, it was too far of a walk. I've never parked there. So we're just going to continue. And the thought that we were going to get vouchers at the conclusion of every monthly meeting to go across the street, that's not going to happen. We're staying at First Street Garage or wherever anybody else is.
Also, for clarification, there is a shuttle that does run between the First Street Garage and both KMAC, Coleman Young Municipal Center, and the Guardian. So there is a shuttle that does run.
I didn't know that, but that's not going to influence my decision. I'm in a hurry to get in here when I come downtown. But I want to thank you very much for that, Mr. Slezak. And I would say that we understand and we're set for parking at First Street in the near future. Moving on from item E, public comments. Are there any public comments, Ms. Hunter? Anybody online, any emails, anybody asking for a chance to speak?
There are no hands on Zoom and no emails have been received. I'm sorry, we have Mr. Robert Davis online.
We have who?
Mr. Robert Davis.
Oh, Mr. Robert Davis. All right. Mr. Davis, are you there?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you and we can all hear you.
And I apologize if you hear some background noise, but I'm at the airport returning to the city. So I deeply apologize if you hear some traffic noise.
Well, I can tell you.
In response to, and I thank this honorable body for addressing the merits of the two complaints and clarifying that Mr. Lynch is no longer an employee of the Wayne County Circuit Court. However, there needs to be some clarification because some comments were made by your esteemed counsel, Mr. Longstreet, that are inconsistent with our communication. Prior to me filing these two complaints, months prior, in fact, I sent an inquiry to the Ethics Board public email address in which Mr. Longstreet eventually responded, in which I inquired whether or not employees of the Wayne County Circuit Court were in fact subject to the jurisdiction of this honorable body, based upon the independent investigation that was conducted by the Department of State, which has now been referred to the Michigan Attorney General's Office for possible criminal prosecution with respect to the misuse of Wayne County dollars for political purposes. But what needs to be noted here is my request as it relates to potential litigation. I, in writing, inquired to Mr. Longstreet and to the board through its public email system, whether or not the body, this honorable body, was in compliance with the plain language of the ethics ordinance, which clearly states what process is supposed to be initiated upon the filing of a formal complaint. I have not received a copy of the alleged violators' response from their legal counsel, Colin Einhorn. However, the case in which Mr. Longstreet cited on the record is totally inconsistent with its actual finding. So I would say this, Mr. Chairman, that their interpretation of that particular case, which was litigated in the Michigan Supreme Court, is not consistent with what was stated on the record by your legal counsel or by Colin Einhorn. Accordingly, it is quite clear from the plain language of the state statute that governs the merger of the former Frank Murphy Hall of Justice, as they indicated, Recorder's Court with Third Circuit Court, and as it relates to what constitutes an employee of the county and what constitutes an employee of the court and who has control over those employees. The case law cited and the case law subsequent to that case clearly indicates that Wayne County is the employer of certain employees of the Third Circuit Court. And I believe these two employees, one former and the other, I guess, remains current, are indeed employees of Wayne County. And funds that were improperly expended in violation of state law were county funds. Lastly, and I thank you for allowing me to briefly go over your 2-minute time limit, is to further emphasize the fact that despite the fact that neither one of these employees signed the ethics ordinance acknowledged form, does not alleviate their responsibility to comply with the ethics ordinance. In fact, an employee's failure to submit and file such a form constitutes a violation of the ethics ordinance and can be a basis for ethics ordinance complaint. So I would like for the board to be cognizant of what could lie ahead in respect to getting clarification as to whether or not at least to one of the alleged violators, Ms. Dale, who remains an employee of the Wayne County Circuit Court, is certainly subject to the jurisdiction of this honorable body. And so it was not a confrontational email at all. It was just an email in inquiring, and upon having a conversation with Mr. Longstreet, no litigation was initiated until after these proceedings took place. And so now that I know the basis of this honorable body's decision, and once I receive a copy of the alleged violators' respective responses, I will be able to make a decision as to whether or not litigation is necessary in order for this board to take jurisdiction over complaints that are properly filed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I did let you run a little over, but I want to clarify something. Mr. Reed, have you received a copy of the agenda package that was up for discussion today?
Mr. Chairman, no, I did not. In fact, I had to contact Mr. Longstreet late last night upon me heading to the airport because I'm semi out of the country, heading to the airport, in which to inform him that there was not a notice posted on your public website as to the date and time, as to the time of this morning's meeting.
Well, my question though was a little shorter than that. Did you get a copy of the agenda package that we have been discussing here today? The answer
No.
would either be yes or you did not.
No.
Could I ask why that wouldn't have happened? Isn't that a matter of public record, the agenda package? Is it online, Mr. Longstreet?
I'm not sure whether it should be posted online, at least the agenda.
Well, I want to ask again, is there any way, how did you find out about the meeting today if you didn't get a copy of the agenda package? How would you have known about it?
I told him.
I received, because Mr. Longstreet and I have been in constant communication since even prior to me filing the formal complaint. And that's why I'm a little taken aback by the latest developments that have occurred during the course of this meeting that has detailed conversations with opposing counsel for the alleged violators, which I requested Mr. Longstreet to provide me a copy of, in which he advised me that
All right.
no such responses were received by this board, because that's what the ordinance required.
All right,
so
you've
consider-
answered, Mr. Reed, you've
Davis.
answered my question, and I want to thank you, and other board members may have questions for you. My question for Mr. Longstreet is this. Sir, when you send out the dismissal letters to Mr. Reed concerning this matter, he is going to get copies of the answers that were provided by the two respondents. Am I right or am I wrong?
That's correct.
All right. Well, I tell you what, if you didn't get the agenda package, Mr. Reed, I don't know how to explain that. Yeah. Mr. Davis, I apologize. Mr. Davis?
Davis, Robert Davis.
Robert Davis, I
That's
apologize.
okay. That's okay.
I apologize. Okay. If you didn't get a copy of the answers because you didn't get a copy of the agenda package, you are going to get the dismissal letters that Mr. Longstreet is going to send out, and he is going to provide you with copies of the answers that were filed, the answer that was filed on behalf of both respondents. Mr. Longstreet, you indicated that that is correct. That's our procedure.
Yes,
Yes, so you are going to get copies of them. There's something else I want to point out to you, so that the record is clear regarding your prior communications with Mr. Longstreet. Mr. Longstreet, acting as our counsel, Mr. Davis, he has attempted at every turn to do what the board asked him to do in the most honest, impeccable, ethical manner possible. So whatever you think of his communications or what he might have told you in the past, I want you to know when your complaints first came before the board, we had questions whether we had jurisdiction, or we knew we didn't have jurisdiction over judges, but the question of whether we had jurisdiction over court employees was something we needed to find out about. Well, Mr. Longstreet, being the diligent lawyer that he is, he got answers in from the complainants. He got a copy of the Department of State report. He researched it all. He shepherdized cases. So his recommendation today, just so that we're clear, is based upon his work over the last several weeks, perhaps even last couple months. And even though a communication that you might have received early on was uncertain as to whether jurisdiction existed or not, I really don't know. I don't have the communications in front of me. But what I don't want to have happen here today is to have a situation where Mr. Longstreet, who has done ethically what the board has asked him to do, is impugned in some way. I don't want that to happen.
No, not at all. Mr.
Okay,
Longstreet.
well, okay, but Mr. Reed, you have talked. I've let you
Davis.
go over. You thanked me for letting you go over the limit. My question to the board members is this: does anybody have any questions or comments that they want to make regarding Mr. Longstreet's recommendation based upon the comments that Mr. Davis has made over the last 15 minutes or so? None? Okay. Well, I tell you what, Mr. Davis, we want to thank you very much for your participation here today. I apologize that I got your name wrong a few minutes ago.
That's
I would
okay.
ask Ms. Hunter this question. Ms. Hunter, are there any other individuals wanting to make public comment today?
There are no other hands.
Okay. With there being no other comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn if there is one. Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. We're adjourned. Thank you all very, very much. Are we off Zoom? Excuse